Okay, let's make a start. I've had notice that the first speaker is not far away. It's the price you pay that his earlier appointment at 9 o'clock was at number 10. And I haven't been able to wangle anything with Teresa. But he's on his way, so I'll make a start. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome you. I'm Tim Drye. I'm the chair of the DUG, now called the Data Analysts user group. And I'm really enthused by the subject today, sharing data, because it's the second reason why I was really thrilled to take over DUG from Keith Dugmore. And that is the opportunity that DUG presents, given its way it brings together academia and government and commercial organisations to share data and put them together. And you can always find loads of new stuff when you bring things together. And as we had this year, the Digital Economy Act, one of its sections was definitely helping to facilitate that, and we'll return to that later in the day and at various different times think about those new horizons, those new opportunities. I also thought, though, and you can't be the only one, that virtually every meeting we have this year, I sort of run a sweepstake on when's the first point someone's going to mention GDPR. So I thought I'd get it over with, and put it on my first slide, but actually try and spin a very positive thing. I think GDPR is, once we get over all the hurdles, a really positive thing anyway, but use it to really give a little structure to my introduction. And that's that I think and genuinely believe, and I'm absolutely sure the various speakers we've got today will prove it, that good data, if it's any good, will provoke reactions. And I in my role as what I think data analysts should be, they should be in any organisation the grit in the wheel, if you like, the people who say it ain't necessarily so, and this is the data to prove it. So what do I mean? Well, first, what do I mean by good data? And I think the good data bit is the bit that's so often missed out in a lot of the discussions at the moment, particularly around technology. In that quite often it seems to be that good data just means big, or it just means quick, or in some areas it just means open. But I actually think that none of those automatic things, whilst sometimes helpful, actually address the question. Because the data could be good and be very small. In fact, sometimes it's essentially that it's very small. Sometimes it could be good and it's slower. In fact, in my own field, back in the physics days, very quick stuff can quite often mess things up and not be better than slower data. And in various different guises, sometimes data can be good even though it's not open. The really important thing is that it's not fake. We have fake news all over the place elsewhere, usually when they're talking about content, but lots of data, in a sense, is fake, in that it's not really reflecting what's going on. And I know there's a great example, really easy to pick up on, is the one about the Apple Macs, using the Apple Macs to actually detect holes in the streets. Well, of course, those are sample of Apple Mac users who are very expensive, so you end up fixing high-quality areas in California rather than all the real potholes in various other areas of the country. Biased, distorted data, however big, however fast, and however open, can be seriously dangerous. If you've got unbiased stuff, that means you're approximately right. One of my own little handholders is I'd rather be approximately right than accurately wrong. But sadly, lots of people don't make as much money out of selling bits of kit and fast solutions if you got good data, but you do it if you got lots of it, and you can monetize it in a way. But I love the fact, and it refers to our last speaker. I hope you get the chance to stay around to listen to the physicist Roberto talk about cosmology and consumers. But right on cue this week, we had an amazing example of vast scales of sharing data between the gravitational field detection. I don't know if you heard it. They detected a gravitational wave of neutron stars collapsing. Because of that, they were then able to direct the radio telescopes and visual telescopes to look in the sky in the right direction, and as a result detect the creation of gold. So you've managed to link cosmology, neutron stars collapsing, and wedding rings. I mean, there is it right on cue this week, this combination of cosmology and consumers. And it was definitely not open data. Admittedly, it was vast amounts of data, and it's definitely not yet open, although I'm sure those sorts of groups do it. So, good data. And the other thing is that it requires humans to judge whether data is good and whether it's relevant. I don't see any way in which you automate that context. And that moves on to my next bit. I think the analysts amongst us are here to provoke. We're here to disrupt. It's way more important as our role to disrupt the place rather than just to optimize. There's an instinct, I think, within data that that's our role, to be efficient. And maybe that's somebody else's role in organizations, in government, in academia. I don't think it's the analyst's role. It's certainly not the role I like. We are there to actually change parameters, and that's why I'm extremely thrilled to have David Willits here from the Resolution Foundation, because they seem to have been an organization that's adept at putting data together to disrupt the ideas of what's going on around us at the moment. I know I've regularly heard them on Radio 4, managing to get positions because they've used the data, because they've highlighted the issues that are going on, particularly in the generation gap, and I'm sure you'll give us some more today. So I want to encourage analysts to have the confidence to be disruptive. There can't be too many of us, so you're never going to be all over the organization, and that's why it takes a number of instincts to be prepared to stand firm with that data as your background, to be resistant, because you provoke, you create reactions, you create denial. And it's not often I say this, but I'm unequivocal in the way that I support the way Theresa May has released this ethnicity framework. It's another example of how just putting data out there creates a reaction and hopefully provokes change. As I say, I've got no, and you saw this week how it creates all sorts of reactions. I love the idea that it was put out there to not give any generation, but just to position it. And maybe a year's time you might see if it actually has created change. But it's one of those illustrations of how we can walk into boardrooms with some numbers, some data, as long as it's good data, that's directing an organization in the right direction, that stands up sometimes without it being big. And there's a huge amount of pressure. But we need to sometimes at that point stay firm, have the confidence, and create cultures where people will accept that data does it. And sometimes that's not in our mindsets as analysts, to be in those, to take on those roles. But that's partly why I think it's so useful sometimes to come into organizations like Doug, where we come out of the organizations, hopefully, we are brought together, and by coming together, that gives us confidence to do better analysis back in our own organizations. That's certainly the dream that I want to hopefully encourage. As I say, there's been a lot of talk about dreams around. The Chinese dream has been talked about this week. There was a certain round talked about the British dream earlier on in the week. Well, I've definitely got a data analyst dream. I wanted to make sure that we get roles where we're talking about important stuff, things that really matter, instead of getting sidelined into the odd stuff. I have a love for stuff that's new. I can always sadly get distracted onto new things. As a number of you know, and as Jan knows very dangerously, has put all the materials together. But also, and I think this is particularly important, not only has it to be novel, it's got to be effective in the way that we make change. So that's my dream. I hope I can give you all encouragement today in what we do. And I'll now pass over to our first speaker, David Willits from the Resolution Foundation. Thank you very much for coming along. And we are looking forward to hearing you provoke us, hopefully, and I hope generate a reaction. Thank you very much.